Okay, just a quick warning before we get started. This video is quite out of date at this point, but I'm gonna keep what I've written for the most part, mainly because this is just a theme. It's an excuse to talk about something that I'm really obsessed with recently, being League of Legends, and I think that it still could provide valuable insight to people who are in similar situations to Ludwig, trying to do his challenge, or just hard stuck trying to get the plot. I have to come clean about something. I have a disease, being that I've been a little bit obsessed with League of Legends. And despite being a top laner myself, I found myself watching more advice for junglers than anything, mainly because of Ludwig Anders Ahgren Gaming Jr. This guy. This guy is coincidentally one of the 3 things that got me into League of Legends. If you don't know, Ludwig had started playing League of Legends actually a few years ago. He would play on or off for small streamer events, and he would every now and then play some games with Cutie Cinderella, who he is the boyfriend of. However, he didn't start taking it seriously until he was invited to an event hosted by a guy who he is best friends with and agrees with every single decision and personal belief that they have. During this event, Ludwig played on the same team as the guy who put Legend in League of Legends, Tyler 1. Now, I don't know if I would call myself a Tyler 1 fan, as in I don't watch any of his content, but I always happen to hear when he's talking about Ludwig.
Ludwig, fuck you, pussy. Has a great time playing League with you. Hope we play again sometime. Go fuck yourself. I'm not kidding. You are garbage and you cost me my reputation, you piece of shit. Thanks for the 10k bits, though.
If it hasn't been made clear by that clip, it's because he fucking hates Ludwig. Tyler 1 hates Ludwig because of this event. Quote,
They got Ludwig's bomb-headed bitch ass, bomb bitch, fuck you, Ludwig ass, playing support. This stupid son of a bitch, he would literally lose to bots. And he's sitting there, he wants to play Thresh.
I feel like it's needless to say that they lost pretty badly.
Ludwig is an absolute liability. He refuses to listen.
Ever since then, Ludwig decided to play the game a little bit more seriously, just to kind of not be that shit next time he's needed. But he still didn't care about improvement in the game. Then, last TwitchCon, on this date, I'm dating the video, guys, Ludwig snuck into a Tyler 1 meet and greet in the disguise. And then, when he was taking his picture with Tyler, he revealed himself. Since this, a bet has been made. Tyler 1 would say out loud to the entire world that he is proud of Ludwig if he can get to Platinum rank before January. For context, Platinum is the top 15% of all players of the game. And in October, Ludwig did his placement rankings, which put him in a whopping Iron 1, which is the lowest rank. It means that he was, I think, barely in the bottom 20% of players. Barely as in he was under it, but like almost broke out. In the past month, he's managed to grind his way from Iron to Bronze to currently Silver. I can't find his OPGG. I'll put it on the screen when I do. Now, there's been a lot of talk about Ludwig's performance as he's ranking up. From what I can discern, people seem to be a little bit concerned as to whether or not he'll be able to rank up to Platinum. Some people would suggest it's because he shouldn't have hit Silver. Most people agree that he's playing pretty badly for his rank, and he seems to just be getting really lucky in terms of messing up in a way that puts him in a place where an opportunity happens to arise. However, I don't think I necessarily agree. After doing research for this video, the only thing I can really say he isn't implementing fully is replicability, meaning that his performance is incredibly volatile and inconsistently good or bad, which could lead to a big downfall when he starts to get towards like high gold. Okay, time to actually come clean about something. I am not good at League of Legends. However, like I said in my fighting game video, I do think I can still help. Mainly because I have something that Ludwig doesn't. No life. So, I've gone through and watched as many videos talking about Ludwig's performance and criticizing him as possible, and I have distilled it down to 4 points. I believe that if Ludwig is able to implement these 4 points, or is currently implementing them or getting better at them, whatever, as long as Ludwig is following these 4 points, he will be able to get to platinum before January and maybe more. So stick with me as I give this advice. And maybe if anything applies to you, follow it yourself. If you happen to like any piece of advice of mine, subscribe to the video. I'm gonna start saying it earlier in the videos now because I think that's good. I think you're supposed to do that. I'm gonna scroll down on the script now. Ludwig, I know you like to click around on the map, and although you should be using the F keys, that's up to personal opinion. But I also feel like you don't always know why you're clicking on the map. And because of that, you tend to do it kind of sporadically and not very valuably. I know this because you always seem to conveniently click on the map wherever a fight is going down, even if it's across the map and there's no thing you could really do from there aside from maybe call out like a flash. It feels like you're not always looking for ganks or even really any intel that the people in the fight can't gather themselves. It almost feels like you're looking for points of which to blame your laners if you lose. This brings me to the most important note of this entire section. You are not a babysitter. If both sides are perfectly even, you are the game changer. Your laner's job at top level is to stall out as long as possible and not get pushed in. Your job as the jungler is to give them the opportunity to start pushing in. You will have to roll the snowball, they have to start collecting snow. The best way to do this is for you to go around, find the biggest snowball, and start pushing it. And, mid too. Mid is kind of just like the everyman lane. You should always be helping mid, but you find your strongest side lane and you really push that one. Usually it's bot, but sometimes it's top, so don't always ignore top. But if your bot lane is the strongest, then make every play about removing stress from them. If you gank to help them get kills, that leads to a big push. If you gank the weak lane, you should be doing it to stop a push. You just stop the movement, freeze the wave, maybe get a kill that could help turn the tide. But the job to gank top lane with a strong bot is just to make sure they're not getting completely shit on, to help keep it a little bit even while bot lane is actively pushing. If you play for your strong lane, things will fall into place. In the strong bot lane example, when team fights start to happen, especially around objectives, if your bot lane is pushed up enough, your enemy's top lane has to start coming to help. They have to kill all of you to get the opportunity to make it even again and maybe get a push going, which gives you the opportunity to have complete control over the game. You have to win that team fight. You have to do your best, because if you can get enough out of that team fight, you can snowball it into pushing your top lane while your bot lane is almost at their nexus. That split push will end the game. However, you can't get to that point if your camera usage is dog shit. So, after watching a couple videos, I have found that the best way to use your camera to gather intel goes more like a flowchart of the thought process that I'm going to put in the following section. So, here's that flowchart. 1. Where is the enemy jungle? You don't always have to see them specifically. You can just guess based on other information which lane is latest to their lane, which one it comes from, the jungle general area, which one comes up from river, or what character they are. Some characters are better with certain buffs than others, so you can use that to guess which one they'll likely be at. Step 2. Can you gank? On both Fiddlesticks and Amumu, it's been suggested a lot that those characters can't really do much until they hit level 6, because their ultimate is incredibly powerful and very valuable. So the idea is that you shouldn't really go for ganks until level 6, and you should do everything that you can to get there faster. And then after leveling, your next priority should be stopping your opponent from leveling, and then it should be taking resources from them. Basically, this is all just saying, don't go for double scuttle all the time. If your opponent is top lane and you're going bot lane, taking the scuttle is cool, but taking their camps is cooler because that provides more experience to you and takes more experience from them. Also, a quick note that some people have talked about, I think in the BBC video, they suggested that at least starting with your second full clear, your pathing shouldn't be go to Raptors, then Krugs, then back up. It should be Krugs, Red, Raptors, Wolves, Blue, Grub, because it's just faster. It's just a straight line. Step 3. What's your closest side lane? Can you help them push into turret by ganking, destroying the wave, crashing, getting a plate? Maybe you can get 2 plates if you can successfully fend off the opponent defense for long enough. Maybe your top laner is gone and you have to freeze the wave for just long enough for them to respawn and start heading back. Maybe you could stop a tower dive that could result in your teammate's death and possibly get a kill from it. If none of those look viable, then go to step 4. What's mid doing? If your side lane is doing fine and doesn't need immediate help, you should go check on mid. Do you think you can provide any help to mid right now? You can use the same thought process as mid lane, but also be aware that middle is where junglers get the most information from. They're going to know where you came from and where you go. So it should make your mid gank very valuable. Otherwise, I don't recommend going for it. And if there's no real pressure to gank your closest lane or mid lane, then you can check your furthest lane just to see what's going on, maybe get some intel, maybe know what your plan is when you get there during your current pathing. This will help you determine early game what lane is your strongest and the one that you should be helping, and late game what lane needs help to better your strongest lane. Last big tip about camera usage, from what I've found and what some other people have found, you can sometimes walk around in circles and like stand in a bush for a while, which is good. Standing in a bush for a gank isn't bad. But when you don't do anything from it and you're not like checking around and at least getting intel while you're doing so, it's kind of a waste of movement and just a waste of time. Although I have noticed, going back to like, the warning, you have gone better at using intel while you're stuck in a place. So like while you're using your W, you're like clicking somewhere. So this point doesn't really matter that much, but just keep it in mind. My next big tip is, now, don't get me wrong, going for big plays is very important, but the problem is building habits. I've always been told that the habits that you train are the habits that you gain, which basically just means if you are doing something the wrong way consistently, when push comes to shove, you're gonna do it the wrong way. So it's better to build the habit of doing the safe thing so that it's your instinct, and then from there, start breaking that habit little by little. Like going for double scuttle. That's nice. But when your opponent shows up, are you prepared for the fight? Are you able to get out, or are you going to get punished and feed? Could you have done something safer? Those are just general things that should be answerable by the time that your opponent gets there, because they probably will. This leads me to my next piece of advice. This doesn't apply to Ludwig exactly anymore, but it does still apply to some junglers out there. You fucking know who you are. Stop wasting fear or any abilities or Q on fucking scuttle. If you are certain that you will not need it, whatever. But if you are getting your opponent's scuttle, if you are punishing your opponent, you have to be ready for them to come punish you back. And stuff like fear, a Mumu Q, those are very valuable escape tools to get the fuck away when you get punished for doing something wrong. It's not worth the extra little bit of damage. Also, utilizing your camera knowledge, that's how you determine what play you should be making. If your jungler is on one side of the map early game, you could do one of 3 things. Number 1, you could, take Scuttle away, which is a decent resource, gets you some vision. You could check to see if you can take any of their jungle monsters, which is infinitely more valuable than 1 Scuttle. Or you could safely do another full clear and get to level 6, which will help you get ganks earlier and help you fight your opponent jungle when push comes to shove. The last big thing when talking about big plays is neutral objectives. When going for objectives and making a play that could lead to a big fight, check your surroundings. If you're going for grub, Check whether your mid or even top lane are in a position to help you. Or check if your mid or top lane opponent is low health. If they are, it means that they, 1, cannot go to grubs without risking dying, or 2, might come to grubs and feed you more. So in that position, you know that your mid or top lane will be able to come gank, and if their lane opponent comes to gank for you, you have to be able to kill them quickly so that you can feed off of them, get stronger, and help that lane push more. You can do all of this while getting at least 1 grub to stop the 6 grub buff. And if you can kill your jungler, that's cool, but don't go for it if they're just able to get away. If your mid or top lane opponent isn't able to come get you, then that's pretty good. At worst, you have a 2v2. Now on to the big step that could help you improve massively at this last one. This one's pretty simple beyond not wasting fear in a Mimikyu. When it comes to actual fighting, there's some good combos that you can do. I have noticed Ludwig has gotten way better at this, although there's still some flaws, but we're going to be talking about an old thing that was specifically pointed out in the BBC video that I think gives you like a good mindset for future engagements that aren't even like remotely similar to that one. Opponent is running after you. You play fiddlesticks. You decide to use fear on them to make them run back and not immediately hit you or punish you. Instead of automatically using all of your skills on this, you can have that chance to walk up while they're feared and literally cannot attack you. When you walk up to them while they're slowed, right at the end of their fear cooldown, you can press E, which silences them and makes it so that they cannot use abilities on you. And now that you're next to them, you could use your Fiddlesticks W for maximum length and maximum distance to deal insane damage. And if your W wouldn't kill, then you can mix in a few autos between your E and W just to get a little bit of extra damage before you fully pop the W. Either way, instead of, like Ludwig did in this clip, using your flash to get the kill, you can just save your flash. Which means that, especially at that point in the game, you could use it for a really good play later on that could just straight up win the game for your team. That would be worth an MVP. Speaking of game ending and MVP, I have one last tip for you. I know you do post-game reviews. I just think that maybe you aren't doing them as well or effectively as you could be. You've started to do some post-game VOD review, which is good, and your post-game review has gotten a little bit better. But you also spend a long time looking at stats, especially stats that you don't get any value out of looking at. When you look at stats after both a win and a loss, you make the same mistake, which is just being too emotional about the game, whether you win or lose, and only caring about comparing yourself to teammates. Like I hinted at earlier in the first tip, you are looking at different lanes so you know who you can blame a loss on. You like to feel valuable to your team, which is good, and I get that, like, comparing yourself to them is for content and for the storyline, which is, Hey, I'm here. I'm on the website. I get it. Like, do what you do, babe. Like, you're fine. Like, a lot of people have said, like, hey, don't check this out. Don't do this. But I'm fully in the camp of you should be able to do that because you are a content creator doing a YouTube video challenge. And the video is going to be sick, too. However, you can tend to take a little bit too much time doing it. Even maybe a little too much time for the YouTube video. Also, on like the yard and stuff, you seem to use OPGG scores as if they mean literally anything. Performance indicators don't actually care about your performance because they do not have the context of the game. Just because you did a pretty good ult 45 minutes into a game doesn't mean that you deserve MVP. It means that your game lasted for 45 minutes. OPGG doesn't care that the game lasted 45 minutes. It doesn't look at every single input, every single movement, every single ability usage. All that it looks at is whether or not you got a lot of kills at one time, and then also your opponents died a lot at the same time. Checking your OPGG score is funny and does build stakes for the challenge, but spending too long on it and maybe putting a little bit too much personal value into it is completely useless. So if you spend a little bit less time on OPGG and checking out the scores and comparing yourself and everything, this video won't just make a killer beginning of the year video that will be sadly wasted on January ad revenue, but maybe, just maybe, this could be a bomb end of the year video that will get you all that Christmas ad revenue. Oh, you might even get a bit of a fucking third yard set. My last big tip is something that you tend to fall into sometimes. You've gotten better at it, but you tend to, fall back into this. It's a habit you gain from Valorant. You sometimes try to IGL, and in Valorant, that's perfectly fine. But in League, it's a little bit too complex of a game, and you're a little bit way too new at it to always be IGLing. Despite jungle being the role that's probably best for it in solo queue, it doesn't mean you should be making calls and expecting them to be listened to. If a call that you make is bad for any reason, your team will not do it because it's just bad for them for some reason. And instead of flaming them, I think a good practice could be thinking about 3 other calls you could have made that maybe your team would have listened to, which requires you to think about, their wave state, which requires you to think about their position, their mentality, what's going on with them, and then allows you to later on know, oh, in this similar position, going for grubs didn't work. I should instead gank top lane and then go for grubs. I think that at the current rate, unless gold is infinitely harder than silver or bronze or iron, Ludwig will probably barely clutch out the win. Or, not close, which he, tends to do. Either way, it'll make for a good video that I'm going to love. I also kind of hope that Ludwig continues to play League after January, maybe like once a week on a member stream, mainly because they're like really fun to watch. He has no reason to watch this video, but if he does, he should know that I am a massive fan of his. He's a big motivator for me to make content that I love and also be a better person. Because of him, I got into Melee, which got me into Beyond the Summit, which got me into content creation for esports, which is the career path that I would love to go down. So, if you're watching this, Lud, can I have a job at Off-Brand?